Today I am going to take a lecture on mental health model. After I complete my lecture, you will know what mental health model is all about, its prevention and the types, identify the intervention strategies, evaluate the pros and cons of this model, and also analyze the different aspects of the mental health model. What are models and paradigms? There are two important types in the field of psychology, namely models and paradigms or perspectives. The term model refers to important relationship among the findings in scientific studies. For example, in order to explain the dynamic functioning of the brain, one can relate to the functions of a computer. Psychologists, on the other hand, prefer terms like paradigms or perspectives because they provide a certain degree of precision and also because they have an advantage of being simple in indicating their standpoint. However, the information provided here has been molded into the term model because the term not only allows the adjustment of the data in the field of community psychology, but also because the precision can be compromised to set the various goals of community psychology. Let me tell you about the various models in community psychology. There is a mental health model, there is a social model of mental health, organizational model of mental health, and ecological model of mental health. The models mentioned above by me have a number of assumptions and also some limitations attached to them. Therefore, no model is perfect. But each of these models play a vital role in the development of community psychology. Let me talk about the mental health model to begin with. The mental health model has a clear socio-economic agenda. One of the primary assumptions of this model is that the earlier and larger the scale of interventions, the likelihood of reducing the incidence of mental health problems is that much greater. This model assumes the availability of funding and a service delivery infrastructure which, if in place, makes some sense in addressing mass community needs. Moving on to the second model, which is the social model. The social model focuses on structural inequalities as the root cause of community distress. It argues that the medical model of curing the individual is only a band-aid approach. The main aim of the social model of community psychology is to mobilize communities to put pressure on institutions to bring about the necessary structural changes that will improve the quality of people's lives. The next model is the organizational model of mental health. This model focuses on managing change in group processes and team building among stakeholders in an organizational setting. Organizational development is primarily an organizational model of community psychology as it is concerned with organizational transformation issues drawing from behavioral and social sciences. OD initially transferred applications of the T groups and encounter groups into organizational settings. Much of the earlier focus was on team building and group processes. As the practice of OD developed, social structures and systems were recognized as critical factors in organizational change. The focus shifted from individual to group effectiveness. The current practice of OD is focused on meta-theories and discourse analysis. The next model that I am going to talk about is the ecological model of mental health. This model focuses on the interdependence and evolving relationship between the person and his environment. This interdependence is aptly described in Bishop's statement in 2001 that in Australian concept of society, individuals exist at all levels and the levels exist in humans. In this paradigm, we all participate in socially constructed reality. The ecological model seeks to contextualize the practice of psychology in the locally defined reality of communities, and in so doing attempts to address one of the criticisms levied against the mental health model, that is, it is based on Western mainstream medical model. James Kelly in 1981 notes that we and our settings are interdependent. Pretorius and Ahmed in 2001 also pointed out that the rural communities in South America often experience the traditional practice of psychology in the mental health as inappropriate and irrelevant. This position was confirmed by Holdstock in 1979, who argues that the Western techniques are generally culturally too different to offer a psychological approach towards healing that can be meaningful for the majority of South Africans. Let me talk about the mental health model. A major problem faced by people in communities is the problem of mental health. We all know that mental health is an integral and essential component of health. The WHO Constitution states, health is a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to the community. In this positive sense, mental health is the foundation for individual well-being and the effective functioning of a community. Thus, mental health issue was the important line of action which initiated the branch of community psychology. Over the years, the services and facilities provided for both mental and physical health problems have been remarkably effective. But there may be some ignorant and illiterate people in the community who may not be aware that they suffer from an illness. And even if they are aware of their illness, they may seek other traditional cures, or they may not have the financial facilities to seek professional help. Some of the physical diseases that people living in extremely unhygienic areas acquire are the communicable diseases. For example, cholera, smallpox, chickenpox, and different sexually transmitted diseases which include the recently identified anti-immunity development syndrome, AIDS. This is where the role of community psychology comes in, where the experts in various fields go to the community and seek those who suffer from diseases and require treatment. The mental health model views health problems in the same way as the problems of physical health. The term community is used in the geographical sense to refer to a fixed area of operation or a parameter within which the services will be provided and the treatment will take place. The very idea of keeping mental illness and physical illness on the same pedestal have been criticized. A very famous psychologist named Thomas Zaz is strongly against this view. He says that till now only some mental disorders have been proved to have a biological cause, such as the Down syndrome, which is caused due to an extra chromosome in the 21st pair. On the other hand, a majority of mental illnesses have no such evidences as yet. Moving on to the role of prevention in the mental health model. The mental health model proposed prevention as an important aspect of community mental health. Thus, the most important assumption of the mental health model is its emphasis on prevention. Prevention is a complementary approach in which services are offered to the general population or to the people who are identified as being at risk for a disorder, and they receive services with the expectation that the likelihood of a future disorder will be reduced. Kaplan in 1964 has used the application of the concepts of primary, secondary and tertiary prevention, which are very common in a public health context. These have an important influence in developing the mental health model. Let me talk about the primary prevention. Here, one looks at the high risk groups where the disease has yet to occur, but chances of its occurrence are quite high. If we talk about the secondary prevention, it seeks to reduce the prevalence rate of reducing the number of old cases that have already taken place. The tertiary prevention, on the other hand, is basically a rehabilitation strategy. Again, in primary prevention, the intervention occurs prior to the occurrence of the disease. In secondary prevention, it can be referred as a treatment-based program where now disease has already taken place and the cure is being provided. In tertiary, the emphasis is on reintegration of the patients into the community. Let me give you an example of primary prevention. Sanitation of public water supply to prevent waterborne diseases such as diarrhea, jaundice, etc. Secondary prevention, short sight, dental problems, early signs of leprosy, etc., etc. And in tertiary, the example would be in halfway houses and aftercare clinics. There are three general types of primary prevention. The first approach is the population-wide approach. In this approach, particular population is selected and intervention strategies are planned for that population, and the needs and the requirements of that population are taken care of via those strategies. Number two is the milestone approach. In this approach, the members of the selected population are taken care of at a particular time of their year. For example, maybe winters, when the vulnerability for certain diseases like cough, fever, etc. are high. And finally, the primary prevention intervention. Here only those people are chosen who may not be at high risk of some particular disease. After their selection, the required treatment or services are provided. Now I shall talk about mental health promotion. Mental health promotion is characterized by a focus on well-being rather than on prevention of illness and disorder, although it may also decrease the likelihood of disorders. Therefore, mental health model targets at not just preventing mental disorders but also aims at educating and making people aware of what exactly is mental health. A person who is not mentally fit or healthy is not necessarily someone who has a mental disease or disorder. Jahoda, a famous psychologist, listed a number of traits that a mentally healthy person should have. The maximum number of traits a person possesses, maximum good mental health he will have. The traits are self-actualization, autonomy, integration, positive attitudes towards oneself, mastery over environment, and perception of reality. Health has been defined not simply as the absence of disease, but in a positive way as a resource for everyday life, a positive concept emphasizing social and personal resources as well as physical capabilities, as given by the World Health Organization in 1986. The rural parts of India are the ones that lack the services and facilities provided for mental and physical health problems. There are a number of reasons why the people living in rural and some living in the urban parts of India are not aware of what is meant by mental health. Some of these factors are illiteracy, stigmatization, communication gap, and belief of people in traditional cures and treatments. What is an intervention and what are the different types of intervention? Intervention in its simplest sense means treatment on time. There are a number of aspects that need to be taken care of while formulating intervention programs or solving mental health issues. One of them is the individual itself. If a number of individuals are thrown into an extremely stressful situation, some might cope with it, whereas others might not be able to. In such a case, the intervention strategy needs to be formulated in such a way that the weaknesses and coping skills of these individuals are taken care of. Another aspect that needs to be kept in mind is the environment. Here, an intervention strategy must be formed by taking care of the abilities of the individuals in dealing with highly stressful environments. And finally, the social class is also an important aspect in making an intervention strategy. What are the two typical intervention strategies? The two major forms of interventions in mental health model are number 1, crisis intervention, and number 2, the mental health consultation. Let me begin with crisis intervention. Miller and Isco, after reviewing several observations of social and political crises, concluded that crises are perceived as threatening and potentially dangerous, upsets the social equilibrium. They, however, also contain powerful incentives for change and opportunities for growth. Kaplan defined crisis as a period of emotional upset that he feels endures for 1 to 6 weeks. These crises are caused by environmental change and individuals' reactions to them. The major characteristics of a crisis are tension, emotional discomfort, signs of depression, lethargy, and lack of problem-solving abilities. The crisis intervention aims at, number 1, resolving an individual's crisis as early as possible so that the individual is secure from any mental disorder in the future. It does not guarantee a mentally healthy future, but the chances of a mental disorder to occur decreases. Number 2, improvement of the individual's coping skills and motivates him or her to perform better at any problem-solving task. Number 3, it strengthens the person to cope with any stressful or crisis situation. It helps in providing immunity against crisis situations. Moving on to mental health consultation. Mental health consultation primarily refers to professional help that is provided or asked for an individual going through a difficult stage of life. The difficulty may be family issues or any other stressful life event. In this intervention strategy, the individual has lost all hopes and is unable to use his or her own coping and problem skills. This leads him or her to seek professional help from someone who is more experienced. Mental health consultation occurs at a much earlier stage than crisis intervention. And the causes of distress here are less severe and less discomforting than in the case of a crisis. This type of consultation was developed as a preventative approach to dealing with mental disorders. Now I'm going to talk about assessment. Even though in today's time the mental health model is used as the base of community psychology, the model faces a number of critiques. The very first criticism of this model is the use of community in terms of geographical area. This term is taken directly from the physical health model. Secondly, the mental health model completely rejects the idea of the community playing a big role in the health and competence of an individual. It disagrees with the community can affect an individual's health by either enhancing or degrading it. Thirdly, another criticism is that the model does not take into account the dynamic and constantly changing nature of both the individual as well as the community. Fourthly, in this model, it is assumed that some values are considered to be universal in nature, that is, the values that every person believes in and follows. But the fact that all individuals share those values is questionable and criticized upon. For example, if one person thinks that it is stigmatizing to go to a mental health hospital rather than going to a religious priest, is not a universal value. It is clear that a community comprises of individuals, but it is not necessary that if individuals' mental health is achieved, then the community is also mentally healthy. The interaction between the two is extremely important and has to be kept in mind that it should be healthy as well. Another criticism is that the mental health model puts great emphasis on the psychological background of the individuals within a community, but it never focuses on how the community is affecting the individual. As I had talked about earlier, the dynamic nature of the community is ignored. Finally, the model tries every possible way to change and develop the individual into a better human being. But little or no stress is applied on the development of the community, which might be playing an important role in the individual's health. Let me summarize my lecture. Two important terms in community psychology are models and paradigms. The different models of community psychology are mental health model, social model, organizational model, and ecological model. Mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to the community. The major role that prevention plays in the mental health model is very important. Prevention is a complementary approach in which services are offered to the general population or to the people who are identified as being at risk for a disorder, and they receive services with the expectation that the likelihood of a future disorder will be reduced. Primary prevention consists of population-wide approach, milestone approach, and primary prevention interventions. Then follows the secondary prevention and finally the tertiary prevention. Mental health promotion is characterized by a focus on well-being rather than on prevention of illness and disorder, although it may also decrease the likelihood of disorders. Intervention means treatment on time with two types: crisis intervention and mental health consultation intervention and their applications. Assessment of the mental health model shows the various criticisms that arose from the different ideas presented in this model.